Hello folks, Sunny Area here. I just wanted to begin this with a very quick overview of kind of the state of my character going into this key. So my Paladin is currently 481 eye level. This is the kind of standard talent page that I would run in pretty much any M+ key. There is never really an argument for focused enmity because you, yes, gain single target, but you lose so much AoE. And in many cases you want to be pulling trash into bosses anyway when you get to really higher keys. You don't need, realistically, any of the off-healing talents. You do pretty good off-healing without it, and so far I've found very few uses of Blessing of Spell Warding. I know they exist, but generally speaking, Blessing of Protection is really good for some of the fixates and bleeds, and Spell Warding just doesn't line up, so you don't have to worry about that. I am running a Haste Verse Mastery Crit order of priority. Basically my choice for this is, I see a lot of people running a lot of crit, which is really, really nice because obviously it provides good damage. It obviously can help your off healing a bit, and it can increase your parry chance. So for anyone who doesn't know, when you parry an attack, as in a physical melee attack, you completely negate that attack. You take 0 damage from it. Two downsides to parry. It does not work on spells, it only works on physical attacks, and it doesn't work if anyone is behind you, only if they're directly in front of you. So, with those caveats in mind, and the fact that there is an awful lot of magical spell damage that comes through this season, I opted for Verse instead. So, I have approximately 25% Verse. This gives me, well, 12.5% damage reduction all the time. I could have gone a little bit more Mastery, but the advantage of this is if I ever happen to be out of Consecration, I'm still getting a nice DR. And it's pretty good for damage, honestly, as well. In terms of my gear, my embellishments that I'm running are the Frostfire Legguards of Preparation, which is giving you haste when you tag a new mob, basically, so on every pull, and if you pull, if your chain pulls together. And I'm also currently running the Primal Molten Vambraces with the Shadowflame Armor Patch enchant on. I'm thinking of switching this out to a Lariat, but that will probably happen probably 1 to 3 weeks from now, depending on if I get any more sockets in the vault or not. In terms of a very quick damage breakdown, you will see that Avenger's Shield is your highest source of damage, although it is, if you look at it in details, it might not look like it, because it is split between the actual shields and then the Tears Enforcer procs. And the Cleansing Flame, this is your 4 set. This is really, really strong. A 4 set providing, almost 10% of your damage in a key is kind of massive. So it's really good. It also increases your healing, a bunch of other things. Trinket-wise, for this, didn't mention that one before, I'm running the Branch of Tormented Ancient for damage. This is purely for damage, it's not for anything else. I would replace this ideally with a Farak Trinket if I had one, but I don't. And Prophetic Stone Scales, just as a everything's gone horribly wrong, I've fallen over, we haven't bricked the key. It's a if I mess up trinket, basically. So yeah, from that then we will go on to the key itself. So to start off with, I didn't begin my recording early enough for this, but it's really, really good when you're in a pug, which is what this is, to have a communication session kind of before the start of the key. So we all just sat there for 3 or 4 minutes, had a chat about the route we were doing. Shaman made a couple of really good suggestions actually, so credit to him for this one. And this ended up being a really clean run. So in the case of the first room, the sort of black ghoul looking things that are all over the place, they're actually really rough to pull, because the casts that go off will almost one-shot someone if they go off, and they only give 0.3% each, so they're really not worth pulling. So for our first pull, we've come through here, we've grabbed 2 packs of the guards and the witch at the same time. This is pretty simple pull as long as the healer is on top of the edge casts, in which case I am doing a little bit off healing here and there when I see someone looking in trouble.
Shockwave.
In terms of cooldown usage and such with Prop Pal, just send everything. I try and line it up as best as I can so that I have Wings, my Trinket, and Divine Toll, and I have Tear inside my Empowered Consecration, because then there's a chance that all those are reflected for more damage, and that's how you get the big 4-set damage proc. But if you need to send them, just send them, and there's really very few reasons to hold, unless you're right at the very end of the pull. So both these pulls are quite small. This is just the patrol from upstairs and the 3 in the corner. A couple of kicks here that have to be done, but realistically 5 people, one of them being a prop paladin, kicking is not an issue. Having the storming affix is quite frustrating. I think a lot of people will find that, especially when you've got a heavy melee group, because many of those tornadoes are going to be spawning in melee. Yeah, just cleaning up the pack here. We will go from here to the boss room now to do the Witch's boss. We'll do the left and right side pack clear first, together. As a paladin, if you just throw your Avenger Shield at one, you can grab it and just run straight across the other one. It won't run across the room and pull the boss in this case, don't worry about that. So just drag them all into the corner. Be very careful, because when the little frog guys die, they put these green swirlies on the floor, and yeah, if you stand in those you get disoriented, which I don't think happened in this key, but it does happen to me quite a bit. I'm not always paying attention. It can be a bit rough. That's the main argument I would make for not pulling these packs into the boss, because if something important happens and someone gets disoriented, that's a dead person. So yeah, I'm just going to send my cooldowns on pull here. The group as a whole is holding Bloodlust until the second witch comes live, because she is the more dangerous, by far. In terms of what the different witches do, they all do a cast which just hits people randomly, it hurts. The first witch will occasionally take control of a player. It doesn't last very long, and I believe, if I'm not correct, that you can kind of injure the player and it gets them out of it. But you don't want to kill them, so be careful of that. The second witch... the first witch also puts a 50% reduced healing debuff on everyone, which is pretty rough. The second witch, this being the dangerous one, if you stand still, she puts an increasingly dangerous stacking dot on you. In the case of that, you can just jump on the spot to clear it if you don't want to move. And she also puts these circles around people, the purple circles. If you overlap that circle with someone else, so that the circles themselves can overlap, but you don't want your circle to go over another player, if that happens, then that player, and you as well, because you'll be overlapped with their circle, will take quite a bit of damage. For the third one, every time... I think it's a bit like a Thornmail, if anyone's played League of Legends. Every time you hit the boss, you take like a little bit of physical damage back. And she also casts on one target this kind of bramble effect. It's a bit like Grievous, the affix, that I think is not there anymore this season. So basically you take ticking damage until you are healed above 90% health. In terms of kicking priorities here as well, the primary witch, i.e. the one that's currently active, is the most dangerous. She does more damage with her casts than the other two, so you want to make sure those are kicked. But if you have, Avenger Shield up, other kicks up, then just send them on the other witches, because it's all just less damage taken by the group that way. Something I've realised with this as well, because you can't damage the witches really while they're not active, they have like a 99.9% DR or something. It's very easy for the DPS people to basically rip aggro off of you when the witch becomes active, because in that instantaneous moment you have very little threat control over her, and then everyone starts slamming her. So I try and taunt every time there is a transition.
Beautiful. My thorns will rip you to shreds.
Whenever that bramble cast goes on someone as well, and the DBM's telling me heal to full, I'll usually put a couple of Word of Glories there to help the healer out, just to make their life a little easier. So I'm just checking the route there because, as I said, this was an adjusted route that we agreed as a group, and I'm not 100% used to it. So it's never a bad thing. If you're not sure, take a second, make sure that you're confident, and then go. Yes, key is timed. You do have to keep moving, but if you pull it incorrectly and wipe, or you pull too small and thus don't, all these things can affect your ability to complete the key. So it's much better to be confident than to rush. So in this area we've done basically the courtyard in 2 pulls. There is a pack in the far back right corner, behind where I'm currently standing, which we will not be pulling. There's not really a particular reason for this, it's just they're a little annoying. There's a couple extra casts, more damage, whatever else. They're not needed in this route.
Watch your step.
When the 2 little ads here are dead, I'm going to grab some stuff from the corridor to the right and bring it into this lady, because she's not particularly dangerous. She has this tank buster that she's doing right now on me. It doesn't really seem to do much, so I've never really thought of it as a mechanic. I don't need to press a defensive for it or anything else.
Watch your step.
So just grabbing a little bit more trash so that we're not just single targeting down a mob. Got myself stuck in the corner there. This entire next section is a lot of running back and forth, so basically I'll get the DPS to wait out here in the courtyard. I'll run in, I'll grab a bunch of stuff, and then I'll bring it back out to here, and thus it'll all line of sight group up and we can AoE it down. I didn't intend at this point to pull just these 2, but they are kind of dangerous, so as that was all there was, we'll finish it off, clean up the pull, make sure everyone's confident, and then carry on with the next one. If you do get lucky, the lightning strikes that are hitting the floor and creating fire, they can actually damage the enemy NPCs, but they're not really predictable. And likewise, they'll hurt you, so I would avoid them in general, but it's completely RNG if they actually get you or not. So Evoker's being very nice and rescuing me out there, which is great. So in this case, as an example, I drop my Empowered Consecration, and then I press Divine Toll for a quite significant damage boost, as you can see on the meters at the moment. The DPS will overtake me, but as a prop Paladin, on pull in AoE, you should almost always be top damage in terms of your burst. It's a very safe tank when it comes to aggro in that regard. Alright, as that pool's cleaned up, so I'm just going to head in for another one now. So when you pull this one that's next to the boss over there, never use a shield, because there are 4 mobs and your shield bounces 5 times. There is a chance that you will potentially bounce to the boss. It wouldn't matter too much, because as you're running out the room it would reset anyway. But as you're not in melee range, what the boss does when you're not in melee, a fixed boss like that, is it will hit the available targets for a massive hit, and it might just kill you mid-pull before you can get out of the room. The dinner bell casts of the stewards are really quite annoying. If you stand in them, it doesn't hurt too much. I think it does if you're a DPS, but as a tank it's fine. But it does silence you for 3 to 4 seconds, so I would generally always avoid it. If you want to not lose damage uptime, that's this cast here, the dinner bell. If you want to not lose damage uptime, you can stand in it with a bubble, if you don't think you'll need your bubble again in the future. So again, just conferring with the Mythic Dungeon Tools add-on, I don't usually pull the pack at the very farthest end of the room here, this one, so I was just checking what was required by the route. So in this case I've used Divine Toll there just to give me that nice shield, so every time you do damage with Avenger Shield you get an Absorb Shield for 30% of damage dealt, which includes damage dealt by the Tears Enforcer procs. I was a little bit slow on the lay on hands there. I think the healer had mostly got him healed before I put it on, but oh well. If these pulls feel uncomfortable when you're running through the corridor and bringing them back outside, obviously this is made much easier by having an Invoker to rescue me, but you basically push a defensive. Like, you can use, Ardent Defender, you can use Eye of Tyr. I generally try and hold wings for a damage cooldown. I try not to use it defensively, I try to use it offensively. I mean, it's got defensive value at the same time, but while I'm gathering, if you send wings on that part, you'll have a much lower overall damage done. So this guy was a bad choice looking at it sort of in retrospective. My thought was, I wasn't quite working out the hero timers here, my thought was we would go and do the third boss now, and then come back for tree boss, but then realizing, as we're now talking about it in chat, realizing that there's only 60-70 seconds back on, a suggestion by the Demon Hunter, we'll go left here and clean out this room, and then go back to the tree boss. That just makes much more sense with the hero, because you really want to hero the tree boss. So what I should have done is I should have pulled that steward in here, and we could have done it all in one pull. But hindsight and all that. If you come in this room and this witch does not spawn, you need the sort of bookshelf that's kind of behind my character right now to the right. You need to basically walk up to it. It's a weird triggered by location thing, so if no one steps on the correct spot, she doesn't appear. Or at least that's my experience. Some runs, initially when I was doing this dungeon, she would be there, some she wouldn't be there, and I couldn't work out why. Regarding the Discord sounds, it's just me hanging out with some friends at the same time. They weren't in the queue with me. Yeah, so just really important again, before you do a thing, take a moment, make sure everyone's happy with what you're going to do. Just talking about it, making sure we're all confident, we all know what we're going to do, and then we can go straight into it. Hero is now off cooldown, so we're good to go. So again, here I'm just going to pop everything on pull to get as much damage burst through as I can.
Defensive.
The smash, I think it's called crush, that this boss does, it does quite a lot of damage to the tank, but the first few casts won't hurt. So the longer this boss goes on, the more stacks he gets. You can see it above his...
defensive.
I can actually see it on my screen. You can see it on the boss counter on the right side of the screen. One of the little buffs he gets underneath him, it's a little bit small. Basically, you reset these by dragging him through the fire, but when you do that, the boss deals a lot of damage to the group. So you have to only do it when the healer knows you're going to do it. So in this case, he's done a large absorb shield from the Mistweaver before it went through, just to make sure everyone's healthy.
Defensive.
But if you do find yourself on high stacks, and you're getting tank busted, you do want to use a defensive. As a prop paladin, we have two tools to help people survive the brambles. We can Blessing of Sacrifice if we think it's going to take a while to kill the bramble. And generally I use it to avoid a nasty overlap. Blessing of Protection will actually completely remove the bramble.
Move boss.
So if you think, oh, I need to clear the stacks, but oh, someone's brambled right now, you don't want to ever overlap those two, because it will be guaranteed death for the person who's brambled.
Defensive.
Okay. So I'm just going to bop that off that guy. Now we should be pretty safe.
Defensive.
In this case, the reason I did that is because he didn't have his defensive available, and the shaman is the squishiest member of this group currently. So. Okay, so we're just going to focus this thing down, get it dead, and then I believe I'm going to clear it after this because there's fire right behind me. So it's a little dangerous when you turn around like that. You have to be very careful. If you put your back to the boss and he hits you, you lose all of your ability to dodge, and to block, and to parry. So for Paladin, most of that's around the blocking. which can
Defensive.
reduce, I think it's about 30% or something, and I have like a 60% block chance. So it does reduce an awful lot of boss damage. And then from here to the end, I think we're just going to finish it off, no more clears.
Defensive.
So I could definitely have played this more
Move
defensively, shall we say. I'm kind of greeding for globals for damage in this regard, so if you look, my bubble has not been used, my Guardian of the Ancient Kings has not been used. There are still buttons I
Defensive.
could have pressed to keep myself alive. That's me using the Guardian just there. We're getting a little bit high on the stacks at the end here. Credit to the Mistweaver in that pool though, he was absolutely smashing the healing, and it felt a lot safer than many of the times I've tried this key otherwise. So we're just waiting for him to have mana. We're absolutely fine on time, so there is no rush. Always be aware of how much time you have. Never feel like you have to rush if you don't have to rush. Tip for this
Watch your
boss.
step.
Obviously, you always want to keep up your Shield the Righteous, just like always, because he actually does hurt a lot. He does a lot of physical damage to the tank. You also want to try and not stand in the explosion of these swirlies, because they do a significant amount of damage. If you stand on the green ground, it hurts a little bit, it's not too bad, but you don't want to spend time just hanging out in it if you can help it. Whenever he summons the 3 or 4 little green guys that just come out now, you want to always be able to Avenger Shield those, because realistically it's the only way you can have the aggro immediately for all of them. So if you see on the right side of my screen, I've got this kind of a timeline bar that's moving down. That is basically Weak Aura, which is explaining the sequence of what the boss is going to do. So I can hopefully, unless I mess it up,
Shockwave.
always know, this is going to happen in 2 seconds, I should hold this ability so I can deal with it. Camera angle's a little bit weird in here because I'm a little bit too zoomed out, so occasionally I clip into the chandeliers and stuff from the ceiling.
Watch your step.
As a general rule of thumb for tanking though, you do want to be quite zoomed out. It gives you a much better perspective of what's going on. Don't be afraid to rotate your camera around as well. If you have to position your back to the wall, you don't have to not see anything, you don't have to have the camera in your back. You can spin it around so you're looking at the front of yourself as well. Just be
your
careful,
step.
because yeah, it can get confusing quite quickly. I don't like doing that too much. So that's a large life cocoon heal there from the Mistweaver keeping himself alive. With these frontals, if you move as a group, it's somewhat easier to deal with. Basically, he will randomly be baited to cast that frontal on one of the members of the party. It can be the tank, can be the healer, can be anyone. So if you're all together, you know where it's going to be, and then you can all move to get out of it. These guys, if they reach the boss and he eats
Watch
them,
your
he does a
step.
big burst of damage to the group. So it's really important if they get close, you want to CC them in some form. As a Paladin,
Shockwave.
you've got Hammer of Justice as your best one. Blinding Light will give you literally a couple of extra seconds because it'll wander disoriented for a second until your DPS hits it, in which case it'll be broken free. If it's about to hit the boss, it
Watch
might be
your
that extra second you need. So definitely wouldn't, I'd use it. Ring is really nice here as well from the monk. That just makes the ads incapable of reaching the boss for the duration it's down. There's the Hammer of Justice. Unfortunately overlapped with the cap totem from
Watch
the
your
shaman,
step.
but as I said, we're pugs, we're not in Discord, we don't know what we're all about to press. It's definitely a different game when you play with an organised group to when you play with people that you've been effectively matchmade with. There we go, nice and clean. Probably shouldn't have pressed Divine Toll there at the end, held it for the next pull, but it's alright. So there's some RP here before this door will open, it's kind of frustrating sometimes. The first time it opens, I believe it just opens on its own. You don't actually have to do it.
It seems you have slaughtered my entire house.
So we're just going to do all this together. The dangerous thing here actually is, as long as you kick the witch that's on the right there, then the only danger is the edge. So make sure the witch is kicked, and help the healer with off healing on the edge if it looks dangerous.
Shockwave.
So we've pulled the matron as well, which is fine. The matron will put a mark on someone, which basically does a bit of damage, bit of damage, bit of damage, and at the end it does a big chunk of damage. So that's just the person that goes on needs to use a defensive, assuming it's not the tank. If it is the tank, it doesn't hurt too much, it's fine. But still, the focus here should be on the etch, as being focused. It's definitely the scariest mob in this bull.
Defensive.
And for the matron as well, she does a sort of AoE Shadow Bolt cast or some such. That needs to be kicked.
Shockwave.
If you do miss the kick on the little soldier guard guy, it doesn't really matter, it just makes the pull last longer. It's him casting his own defensive.
Shockwave.
It'll just take a lot longer to kill him if you don't do it. So if I remember correctly, when you go down the stairs here, assuming you kill everything downstairs, which you should, you need 88.5%, I believe. So as we're above that, so we're fine. It's always good to keep in mind what the sort of benchmark counts are at various stages in the dungeon, so that you can have a kind of running idea in your head, like, oh, have I missed something? Do I need to grab extra? Have I pulled too much? Can I maybe skip something? There are definitely keys where ninja pulls do happen, things that you weren't intending, and as much as possible, it's really good to account for that by altering your route. If you've done your route and it's a perfect 100%, someone pulls an extra pack worth, let's say, 8%. You don't want to do 108% of the key, because that's just taking up time with your timer. So you want to cut something out later on if you can. The most common dungeons for me in ninja pulling, I would say, are Everbloom and Taldazar. I think those are the two that it happens the most.
Move boss.
So here, this witch basically puts down it's coded like a totem, so she puts it on the floor, and it has an area of effect around it. If she stands in it, she gets something like a 40 or 50% damage reduction, so you basically need to make sure you kick her so that she can move, and then take her out of the zone. There we go. Healer's good on mana, everyone's fine, we're just going to go straight into it.
3, 2.
So again, we're going to go straight with... I'm holding my trinket here for when I have wings, because wings with the increased crit chance and damage dealt does impact your trinkets. And it also did line up nicely there with the empowered consecration. So for an on-pull burst of damage, it's really good. I'm not entirely sure the correct positioning for tanking this boss. I like to do it at the side because of the dispel that happens. So periodically he will cast I think it's a disease, on a player, which has just been dispelled over there at the side. They get a very large ring around them, and if their ring is on top of anyone else when it's dispelled or when it times out, it basically passes it around. It's a contagious disease, if you like. So you want to leave them plenty of space. You see the big ring there, which he's just passed to me, which is really useful. You want to leave plenty of space for people to be able to go places, so that's why if we tank it off to one side, it will leave the entire room for people to spread out if they need to. This guy is kind of a target dummy. There's not really much that goes on with him, you just have to dodge these swirlies. Once Lady Waycrest comes over to the platform, honestly, the fight gets easier. People always seem to think it gets harder, but it gets easier. The swirlies are no longer there, you don't have to dodge them. Sort of silvery white ones. Instead, you just have to kick her. And as a paladin, having an extra target to kick versus a bunch of swirlies you don't have to stand in, I know which one I prefer. Because I'm running a lot of haste, I don't really have too much issue keeping up my Shield of the Righteous and healing myself. Also, my healer is doing quite a bit of healing on me. If you have to choose between losing uptime on Shield of the Righteous and using a Word of Glory on yourself, you can't do both, then always keep the uptime. Because if you start to get in the position where you've healed yourself, but now you've got no Shield of the Righteous, the damage you're taking is going to be doubled or more, which means then the next time you have 3 Holy Power, you'll have to Word of Glory yourself, and you just start playing this never-ending catch-up game.
3, 2, 1.
But yeah, so she's obviously come over. When she does come over, it happens, I think, after the 3rd heal of Mr. Waycrest, whatever his name is. When she comes over, she's de-aggroed to everyone. So realistically, she almost always goes after the healer, because healer aggro, when no one's targeting something, it always goes on the healer. You want to be ready for her when she comes over, and you want to taunt her immediately. On a Tyrannical key, 1 melee hit on a slightly squishy person or someone who doesn't have full health will kill them. So you want to be really quick on that. When she comes over, she sort of stands for a second, and then she is going to start attacking someone. So that was a pretty clean kill of that one. This pack is trivial as anything. Fortified Tyrannical doesn't matter. It's just, it hits the tank, it occasionally jumps to people, it doesn't really do any damage. There's no cleave, unlike the cats in Darkheart Thicket and Blackrock Hold this season. So there's no reason to stand really far away. If you have a ranged DPS who is dragging the guy really far away when it jumps to him, get them to come into melee. Because all that they do by going far away is slow down how quickly you can kill the pack. They're actually making it take longer. Again, for the cooldowns here, if you have them, just send them. There's no reason to hold them for next boss or anything else. Your AoE as a prop paladin is massive as tanks go. Your single target is okay. It's not amazing. Holding things for single target rather than sending them on AoE forces your DPS to send their abilities on AoE when they should in a Tyrannical week be sending them on single target. And when I say single target, I mean a boss. In terms of tank positioning for this, I've had 2 arguments for and against. I like to do it back here, basically where he spawns, the reason being where these jars spawn is actually based around the boss's location, as far as I've gathered. So if you tank him further out, the jars can spawn further out. And I have had one key which just was weird, because the jar spawned up on a ledge on the left-hand side, and someone had to run all the way around to get it, and it was just a mess. In terms of what you have to do here, there's very little. Off-heal, if someone's struggling, you want a Hammer of Justice when they do their cast, the little ads. Make sure they get stunned. Blinding Light does not work on them, it has to be an actual stun. Hopefully your group will deal with it if you can't. Basically what it does, while it's channeling, the person it's channeling on is completely incapacitated, they can't do anything, and they take damage. I would say that majority this fight, weirdly enough, is probably a really good example of a DPS-led fight. As a tank, all you got to do really is stand there and do stuff. As a healer, all you got to do is just heal stuff. There aren't any particular nasty mechanics. Whenever he casts the Resurrect the Dead spell, this one's about to happen, everyone takes a chunk of damage, so as a healer you got to be prepared for that, and as a prop paladin you want to be ready with a Blessing of Sacrifice or a Word of Glory if it looks like someone is going to take big damage if they're not full health before it. But in terms of DPS, you have to make sure that you're constantly switching to focus the correct target. You need to be using all of your available CC, that applies to everyone, on the little ads, and yeah, just kill it. It's kind of a slightly augmented target dummy.
Quickly, burn it!
Also, if any DPS do watch this, it is not necessarily the healer's job to go and get the jars always. If they're a melee healer and you are a ranged DPS, help them out, go get the jars. And obviously use the jars, don't just pick them up. You have to throw them on the corpses when the thing is dead.
Hurry! Set them aflame before the Trust King resurrects them!
At this point, realistically, the boss is low enough we can kind of start to ignore the ads and just finish the boss. And there we go. That is a timed 25 Waycrest Manor Tyranical with Raging and Storming. And I would say, before it finishes, that this was a very, very, very nice example of a well-communicating, well-playing pug group. It does not always go like this, but sometimes it does, and when it does, it's great.